Thanks for tuning in. Something I speak about often with my friends, my followers, my clients, pretty much anybody I come across that means something to me, which is everybody. I once heard a Warren Buffett quote, which I'm sure was said by millions of people before throughout history, but Warren Buffett once said, "We are reflections of the 5 people we surround ourselves with most." Now, I've dug into this, and it's obviously true. We look at all the people and the habits and the opportunities and the ambition that the people around us have, and we mirror them, or we adapt to them, or create a social norm for that person by allowing our behavior to mimic what they've got going on. The science behind this, so okay, yeah, no, we just personality like to act like these people. It's not actually true. What's going on is our brain cells are neurology, but also neurokinetics. So there are actual neural cells that are termed mirror neurons. And I'm sure there's a technical term named after the scientists that found them. But the essence and what they're referred to in science is mirror neurons. And they prove that, yes, we do. There are brain cells that do not act based on our consciousness necessarily. They act almost in an intuitive, primal mode in which they reflect other people's neural impulses so that we can fit in and survive and communicate. Now, these are real scientific things. I highly encourage you to look into them because the mystical proportions of the knowledge that they provide to you intrinsically are substantial, and you will benefit big time from understanding what mirror neurons are. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about patterns today. This message is about patterns, and that we receive patterns from everything. Now, I wore a hat today because I thought this, when I bought this and I saw this, was one of the most ironically patterned hats I'd ever seen in my life. It's flowers, which is very beautiful and pleasant and happy and euphoric, and then on it says an expletive, and it's backwards, thankfully, and you guys can translate it and read it, but it's the F word, which means pretty much anything in the English human language and other languages as well. It doesn't necessarily always mean good things, but sometimes it does. You see something amazing happen, you're awestruck, you're like, so it sometimes does mean a good thing, but it's a pattern that we use, and a word defines different patterns, right? All these different meanings are just simple neurological patterns that help us understand the reality around us. So the reason I'm wearing this hat and I'm talking about patterns is because this itself is a contradiction of a pattern or set of patterns that we normally would neurologically interpret, right? We would see flowers, we'd be like, oh, that's pleasant. Then we'd see the word, pardon the language, but we'd see the word fuck and we'd be like, that's unpleasant. Now these two things combine both pleasant and unpleasant at the same time. Now here's the flipped perspective. Just for a moment before I get to the point, what if these flowers were poisonous, and what if this word was reflecting awe and goodness? Then the roles are changed completely from our perception of what the pattern should be based on what we've received in the past. By seeing the flowers as poisonous, right? Only if you know what type of flowers these are through knowledge would you know that they're poisonous or not poisonous. Only through an understanding of rhetoric and personality and charm and wit and humor would you understand that the word fuck might not be a negative thing necessarily, depending on who's saying it and in what context. And the same thing, a beautiful flower isn't always something that's going to nourish you. It might kill you. So my point is, anxiety, depression perceived as negative things because we're comparing ourselves to other people who we see might not be having these things occur, or they're not showing them on the surface. Now, euphoria and happiness normally perceived as a good thing, right? Or are we just seeing that on the surface? And are we around somebody who seems happy all the time on the surface, but we get this sinking, depressed, anxious feeling when we're around them that we didn't have before? These are our mirror neurons reflecting their true inner state. Now, the point of me saying this all is not to confuse you, not to see a happy person and think they're sad, and not to see a sad or depressed person or an anxious person and think that they're just focused. That's not necessarily true. Point of this is to empathize with each other, to pick up a new science, the science of mirror neurons, to understand that the external pattern we see is not always a reflection of the meaning within. So whatever we see people dealing with on the outside, that's not necessarily a reflection of what's going on the inside. And we feel what they really feel and what they really have going on, despite what's on the outside and on the surface, right? What our perceived perception of the pattern is not necessarily what's going on. We have to trust our feelings. This isn't just, oh, you're out with somebody at a bar, you're on a date with somebody and you get a bad feeling about this person. No, that's your intuition maybe protecting you a little bit and saying, hey, you're being too open here. Maybe close it down and use your shield a little bit more and understand that you need to be in the power situation. It doesn't mean that person's got bad vibes. At the end of the day, nobody has bad vibes. People just have vibes. What is bad is if that person takes their bad energy and allows it to transmit on the outside. Because if you see somebody in a bar that you're like, oh, that person's got bad vibes, maybe they just got divorced, or maybe their spouse just died. Maybe that's the bad vibe you're feeling, and yes, they're smiling on the surface, not because they're a mean person or a predator, because they're weak and they're hurt, and that's what you're sensing. We need to let go of our judgments, which would be, these flowers are pretty and tasty, and that word is gross and mean and angry. It's not necessarily true. Like, fuck could be the first word you say to the person you meet that's your dream person, because you're just blown away by them. And you could give somebody a flower that they could be allergic to and it could kill them. Like, we need to change our perceptions of what's happening on the surface and dig a little bit deeper, not to know, but to understand. There is a difference. Everything happening on the surface of the world stems from something much deeper, right? That tree did not start as a big tree. It started as a seed underground that took time to grow into the tree that we see. And it's the same thing with emotions and thoughts and externalizations of personality and behavior and outright eruptions from people. Those things are coming from somewhere deeper. We need to understand why before we try to know. Does that make sense, right? We didn't just read a book in high school and say, I know this now. No, we had to take tests. We had to ask questions. We had to write papers. We had to really evolve a process to do our best to understand why something was expressing itself in manifest form. So the point of this is to understand patterns a little bit more and how we form patterns as humans, and also how to restructure our patterns most simply by changing the people we surround ourselves with, changing our environment. If there is something toxic in our behavior or someone else's behavior that we see, the easiest way to cease that is to stop the pattern repetition, right? Your body can recognize this pattern. Oh, that's not good. That's not helping me. Get away from it and stay away from it. If there's people facilitating that, stay away from them. Other people will fill in. The universe, God will send you amazing beings to elicit the highest form of yourself to find its way to the surface.